Hey folks, thank you for stopping by Kaiser's Castle. That music was provided by Axion Ghost and it's called It's Game Time. You can find him on YouTube. There will be a link in the description. Today, grab yourself a seat on my big orange couch, grab yourself a coffee, tea, soda, or adult libation. I have a special treat for you today. Past guest, or you could say an older guest, but he's not old in mind or spirit or body. He is a great gentleman to have on. His name is Dave Milner. He is known as the unpleasant blind guy, and for an unpleasant blind guy, he's pretty pleasant to listen to. And with that being said, Dave, why don't you come on and introduce yourself, brother?
All right. Hello, Kaiser. First of all, and hello to your listeners. First of all, I just want to get into where people can find me and what I do. All right. So they have a little bit of an idea. Of course, I do run the Unpleasant Blind Guy show, have since 2013. You can find that on Spreaker.com at the Unpleasant Blind Guy page. Now, the show times are 1 p.m. Monday through Friday and at midnight on Saturday. And I also am available through Western Free Radio and SHR Media, of course. And I'm also on with Jeff Mitchell. I'm kind of his Ed McMahon. Ed McMahon to his Johnny Carson. Jeff hosts the English Defense League radio show. That it podcasts live. If you want to hear me live, that podcasts live on Thursdays and Sundays at 8:30 p.m. in the UK for Kaiser's UK listeners. 3:30 p.m. in the United States, though, Eastern. All right, and I'm also on with Ken McClinton. Ken hosts TECN TV, the Exceptional Conservative Network, and his program, where he has me on a segment on Thursdays, comes on at 9 p.m. Eastern, and we have a pretty good time. There's plenty of scope there to discuss plenty of stuff, and of course, Kaiser, for your listeners, I have been on with you before, and we just kind of freewheel through these things. You call me up and say, "Hey, Dave, stuff is happening. Want to do a show?" And the subjects are never too little to talk about.
Exactly, and I thought this would be a good show that we could do, just talking about what we got right and what we got wrong on past shows, maybe to start out. And we saw a lot of this stuff was going to come, but the thing about it, I think neither of us saw, was no matter either way that you say that how it got out, whether it was natural or it was man-made, it got out of the place in Wuhan. China stopped all flights within China out of Wuhan, but they continued to allow flights out. So when people say it's not a bioweapons attack, whether it was intentional or unintentional, now an unintentional release, if they would have let the world know, we let some flights go, we found this virus, but instead with the WHO being in collusion with them, they hid that fact. And so by their hiding it and continuing to allow flights out of Wuhan to the rest of the world, this was a global biological weapons attack. Doesn't matter if it was purposeful or they were spraying it. What they did was just send human beings infected in it. This is like a bad movie. What are your thoughts, brother?
Oh my God, man. Again, and I've said this for a few years. 50 years ago, if you were to take today's headlines and put them in a book, it would be dystopian science fiction. All right. I don't know how well it would sell, but that's what it would be. People wouldn't believe that we have reached the stage where we have now. And I guess we should start first at Wuhan, where all this began. Inspectors who went to those labs in Wuhan were fairly shocked when they saw how these various diseases that they were experimenting with were handled. There weren't proper seals on in some of the containment areas. There were other issues that they found. So these labs were strictly amateur time, which is really bad when you're talking about experimenting with contagious diseases. So there's that. All right. And you bring up a great point. It really doesn't matter whether the communist Chinese, uh, guys, let's be sure to separate them from the Taiwanese and the Hong Kongers. Um, it doesn't matter whether they purposely released this or it was released through gross incompetence. It got out, and it has been seized upon by the left mostly as a means to quash the freedom movements, really, and to influence elections, particularly our election. All right, that had been going on. The freedom movements had been going on since, oh God, I think they started Kaiser in 2015, and they just got bigger and bigger. By 2019, okay, you saw, for instance, I mentioned Hong Kong. You saw Avi Yemeni and others covering the Hong Kong protests, and if you looked at some of the pictures, it's a definition of sea of people. So there were those demonstrations going on. There were demonstrations going on in South America, freedom demonstrations against the Venezuelan dictator down there, and other things. Europe, for freedom, was demonstrating everywhere with hundreds of thousands of demonstrators in some cases. All right, and of course, in the UK, there were also demonstrations like those, and one of the components that ran through all of that, of course, was Antifa. Antifa, guys, if you're listening in the United States, is not just something that popped up here. This has been an international terror group that has operated for years. But the point really I want to make here is that the Wuhan virus has been used by the left to crush liberties and freedoms all over the planet, especially in the United States. And now the Wuhan virus is, and I'm going to steal something from one of the Fox News contributors that I saw a few days ago, it is one of Joe Biden's running mates. Okay, he's trying to use that to leverage himself into an election so that he can be president for about 20 minutes and then let Kamala Harris take over. What do you think about that, Kaiser?
Well, I agree. And when you mentioned demonstrations, the demonstrations were mostly peaceful, except for when you have Antifa comes out, because anybody who wants freedom obviously is a fascist. That's just how they define fascism. They live in an upside-down little world that's full of nothing but, self-licking ice cream cone. They're in an echo chamber, and they can't get out because they have to be right. Just like the left has become, they have to be right. They're not right, and they're not able to disagree without being disagreeable. They've gotten to that point where they're running somebody that who's a weak horse, and the only way they could level it, I believe, in our country is to have Biden in his basement, because obviously he's got some issues with retention of memory. I mean, I do. That's why I tell people always check stuff out with me, because sometimes I may misremember, and you're not wrong. Antifa started out, it's almost 100 years old, because if you remember right, the East Germans, they're Stasi. They used to call themselves originally Chekist, within the groups of Stasi agents. And Stasi's a whole big thing. I've done shows on it. It's not like something I don't know about, because I was a Cold Warrior. And I know this stuff intimately. And I've done shows on the first president. Well, he was actually the Secretary General of East Germany, or DDR, Deutsches Demokratische Republik, for those of you German speakers out there that I know I have brothers. It's nice having them on too, my Bruden. So anyways, the point being is, even from him on down, the two political parties, and they did have two parties, and one of them, believe this or not, is called the CDU, Christian Democratic Union. You guys can look this up. What's Angela Merkel's party again? Christian Democratic Union. Also, just a little more to elucidate on it. A lot of people forget there's a book out called I'm Erika. It's in German, so I don't think they've done an English translation to it yet. and it's about Angela Merkel and her ties to the FDJ, which, is normal. It's just like the old Soviets had the young pioneers. They were like our Boy Scouts, but it indoctrinates people into communism, Marxism. There's an interesting bend that has happened, though. I will talk about this here in a second. But then she went on to work for Stasi. A lot of people don't realize that Angela Merkel's not a dummy. She was a physicist by training. A German physicist is no slouch, because German colleges are very rigorous, and a lot of people don't realize the English colleges are rigorous, but even English college people who have graduated from different colleges there, like Cambridge and whatnot, they'll tell you German colleges, because they'll sometimes go over there to study, are a bitch to get through. So they demand a lot of rigor. Anywho, so that's basically about the Marxism. Here's the interesting part, and Dave, I think we talked about this too. The professors are all Marxist. They're indoctrinating our children, and this is our fault. This is my fault, your fault, my parents' fault, everybody's fault, because like Reagan said, it'll only take a generation to destroy this nation. And we've allowed our kids to be indoctrinated by the academies, by the colleges, and now they're going even into the grade schools. They've changed the language. Now they're tearing down not just our country, i.e. by fire, just like rust. Rust is a slow destruction of something, and a fire is a quick destruction. You disbelieve me? Look at the burned out wrecks of vehicles. They instantly rust. They rust because they were destroyed. And here's the other fact. These kids are not coming out Marxist. They're coming out Maoist. And people wonder why they have their own little purity spirals and why they will attack each other on occasion. Here's why. Because while they are public faces, oh, I'm gay friendly, I'm friendly to this, I'm friendly to that, there's a reason why it's funny when people watch the riots. You'll hear a black officer be called the N-word, while they'll call homosexuals the F-word. And I'm not talking about the F-U-C-K word. And so these things, people who argue with me saying no, they're Marxist because they're inclusive of everybody. I'm like, no, they're Maoists. Just like Mao. Mao had his long march, and this is their long march. Your thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, let's remember here that Karl Marx was a massive racist. Che Guevara killed a lot of black people. Okay, you will definitely see a lot of divisions within these parties of communists, and as you say, there's a definite difference between a Maoist and a Marxist, and they will clash within themselves. Now they'll come after us before they fight amongst themselves. This is very much like Mohammedans. All right, a Shiite and a Sunni will go at each other like you wouldn't believe, but they'll come after us first. So there's always factionalism, but we have to remember that we, in other words, everyone that isn't them on a general level is the target first, and the target second is everyone that isn't them on a specific level. Like, for instance, with Sunnis, everyone that isn't Sunni is a target after the great Satan. There was I forget who wrote this story, and it was a story titled, will the last person to leave Earth please turn out the sun? And it had to do with the discovery of a star drive and a whole bunch of Earth-type planets. And basically everyone from every faction here on Earth just left the Earth to go do things their own way. I mean, imagine a political persuasion, imagine a racial persuasion, whatever. Everybody runs off and finds their own planet. And there's finally just one guy left on Earth. Okay? And it is really that way. The sad part about this is if these people win, they're just going to be fighting among themselves. Okay, and of course they won't win eventually, but they may win in the short term. The thing is, they will fight amongst themselves, though, because because the purity of a Maoist is far different from, well, not far different, but different from the purity of a Marxist, and maybe even also of a Trotskyite or of a Guevarian. Okay, um, it is fascinating to watch, but for those listening, Americans and people living in other countries as well, on the ground, it still comes down to them or us, and that's increasing, and it's about to get really, really real here in about 45 days.
Oh, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. One thing I always used to use this when I would explain to people the difference in communist. And this is known fact now. Historians have proven this. There was a time where Stalin decided he was going to kill Tito. Well, Tito was a strong man in what was Yugoslavia, the Balkans. And the Balkans have always been impossible to contain because they'll fight against any invaders and join together in the short term. But they have internecine fighting too because you have the staunch conservatives on both sides. You have staunch Catholic, i.e., also slash. I'm trying to think of what they're called. The church is Orthodox Church, and you also have Mohammedans, Muslims that live in all the countries. The main one being Macedonia, which was a part of Yugoslavia. Well, Tito was such a strong man, he was able to keep that country together, and when he died, it fell apart very quickly. But here's the funny thing. Stalin wanted to kill Tito. And guess who killed who? Tito poisoned Stalin. Stalin died by poisoning, and it was Tito who did it. So, you have to think about this. They were both communist, and it was because there was a little uprising in Yugoslavia for a minute. This is back when Hungarians were uprising and everything in the 50s.
1956.
Yep. And they uprose, and Stalin said, "Let me send in my tanks and Tito goes, "I will handle this." And he did. He crushed it. They brutalized their own people. And this has gone on and on. But Stalin said, "Well, you wouldn't let me come in with my men? Okay, I got something for you," and kept trying to hit Tito. Tito's like, "Well, I've about had enough of this." And he sent some people in to rid themselves of Stalin. And that's exactly how Stalin died. So, there's always fuckery afoot. But it's enjoyable to watch it happen sometimes. But I do regret, it was a beautiful day, November 9th, 1989, when the wall fell in Germany from east and west. And that was a beautiful day, and I can't deny how happy I was. I thought it was the end of communism, my main enemy. And I was in the Marine Corps, so I missed it. I was not even in Germany when it happened. And the thing about it is that wall represented something for everybody to see, the difference between the minefields, no man's land, the two different walls that separated Berlin, the killing zone. There's still, when you go to Berlin, they still have the crosses up with every person who was shot by Stasi border guards. This is a fact. And it was a brutal system. And I feel bad that the walls fell, that they didn't leave any of them up. They have them scattered around and cut down bits in Berlin that you can see with the original paintings on them. And they have where the wall was, they just used red brick to symbolize where the walls were, and that's even at Brandenburg Tor. But the thing is, that wall was a physical symbol of communism, and it was something that I think galvanized Americans to be Americans and let the little trifling shit go, and we could discuss it in a rational, reasonable way. And I think by the fall of that wall, I think we lost something within ourselves as Americans. Your thoughts on that, brother?
Well, that's very fascinating. And it's honestly not something that I thought about before, but I can definitely see where the the division between communist and I'd say and individual liberty. The division became more invisible and therefore easier to penetrate. It's uh, as we know from the German communist schools of thought, the penetrations of our society from every angle have occurred and ratcheted up over the past well over 100 years until it's reached this point. Until you have actual young people in the United States brought up in the schools, as you said, which have been compromised, um, who really believe that socialism slash communism is the way to go. You also notice that these young people have absolutely no concept of history of what's gone before, even into the Cold War era. They don't understand what the Stasi used to do. They don't, well, these are the same young people that are perplexed because the Visegrad countries don't want to welcome in the Muslims like the rest of the EU has. All right, but they don't understand that Orban and the rest of them in the Visegrad countries understand well what it's like to have the boot of totalitarianism on their necks. So they're willing to do almost anything to avoid having that happen again. You have young people now who have been raised in an environment that says that all people are good, and to say that something is bad is instantly translated into hate and racism. All right, that critical thinking is hate and racism, and therefore that should all be thrown out the window. And to this younger mindset, some of them, not all, thankfully, not all, but just some of them, all right, they are thinking, hey, let's try this other thing, meaning communism, basically, because we haven't tried it in the United States of America before, which, well, as far as North American territory is concerned, yes, it was tried early on and failed. But they think this hasn't been tried here before. Let's give this a try because people are suffering, we're told, and because there's racism, we're told, and this will resolve racism, we're told. Um, and that's where we're at today. It's very sad that we're against not only a few people in Gen Z, but a lot of people, a lot of the millennials, and too many of the Gen Xers have bought into this propaganda without bothering to check it out. And there, Kaiser, I think, is the biggest thing. It's the thing that got our generation and our parents' generation, and it's the thing that gets all of these generations down past, and that is, and I have to say it, mental laziness. Um, too many of us, um, too many people in your generation, my generation, and in our parents' generation depended on their leaders. Okay, my dad's generation said, hey, you know what? Let's let Jack Kennedy take care of it. Okay, and our generation, what did we do? We said, yeah, hey, we know there are problems. Let's let Reagan take care of it. And what we didn't realize was that you can't. That doesn't work. That never works. You can't put all your hopes and dreams and aspirations on one person, and you certainly can't keep the vigilance of liberty on one person. It has to be an individual thing to each individual person, and we have to watch it like a hawk, because if we don't, then we get exactly what we've got today. And now we find ourselves trying to play catch up and just hoping that this election turns out the right way and we come out the other end of the riots that will happen afterwards with at least a country that we can hang on to for a few more years.
I think you're correct. I mean, here's how I look at it, sadly. This has been tried. I mean, I think even the Pilgrims tried a form of, it wasn't called communism back then, but basically the first batch, I think Rush Limbaugh wrote about it in his book, you know, for whether
Right.
people want to read about it or not. It's historical fact. The first year, people starved because they had a form of communism, because nobody really wanted to do more work if they weren't getting the same amount of food and everything everybody else was getting. You know, if they couldn't keep a little more fruits of their labor, so they had no incentive. But the interesting thing, I think, is we saw it also in the 19th century or 18th century. I can't remember exactly. I think it was the 19th. Gramsci, you know, the Italian Gramsci, and then we had the Vandal brothers that did some things. We've always had this kind of thing pop up, but it was never really popular. And it got kind of popularized after the war, because it was easy to justify at the beginning that us and the Soviets defeated the nasty Germans, and so you know that's the winners write the history, and so the interesting thing I think about that is that we allowed communists in. We allowed the Frankfurt School in. They were from Frankfurt, Germany. They infected, first they went into the academia, Columbia University, and then they infected Hollywood, and then it became fashionable to be communist. And then we had that senator, I'm trying to remember his name now, who hunted them down and was having his hearings on the Un-American Activities Committee. And with that being said, they vilified him, started calling him Tail Gunner Joe. You know, they can say all they want about the man, but the man flew in a aircraft that, if you knew the rate of people in those aircraft that died and how many didn't make their 25 sorties to be able to go home, that's saying something. And the amount of fire that they took, both from the ground and from the air, you know, but yet they still vilified him as, oh, he was just a tail gunner. Really, a tail gunner? How does the enemy normally attack? From the rear. So there's always this nonsense that they've had against anybody on the right. Any kind of structure, any kind of politics in the way that, like, I hate the term conservative, because I look at it as, what has the conservatives conserved? Not a fucking thing. And I mean that. You just have to be able to, we shouldn't be trying to conserve, we should be trying, and Trump has been doing this. I have to be serious about this. You have to be able to push back against them. And Trump is not a Republican. He is a business Democrat. And he even sees, and his best speech he ever did, he called it out and he said there will be no more cultural Marxism taught. And that's what they're getting taught. You know, when I saw the first inklings of this starting in the 90s under Clinton, but it started under Bush Sr., and a lot of people forget his 1,000 Points of Light speech, when he stated, we need a kinder, gentler, more politically correct society. And then Hillary and Bill took political correctness to language and started really ramping it up. And then the division bell, they were just ringing it every day. It culminated with everybody realizing who Hillary was, and she was just more unlikable than Trump. But Trump has kept his promises. And he's actually pushed back, and the reason why, he's seen how the Democrats' tactics are, and they've used all their tactics. They're blowing their load every day. And he just doesn't care, because he knows they're going to do it. There's nothing, and so we're at a point where now we're going to appoint another person to uh, um, why am I mind dumping? God, I hate that. The Supreme Court. And in all honesty, normally I like the court to be a little more even. But at this point, if he puts another one in, because honestly, they can cry all they want, but they do have an extra vote. The Democrats always do, and that's the Chief Justice. You know, there's something about D.C. I hated the swamp, D.C., and I'll tell you why. You go to D.C. and you'll see it. Politicians, their wives start liking getting invited to all the cool parties, you know, and they always used to say communists had the best parties, and they like going to these cocktail parties on the circuit. And John Roberts' wife honestly must love those parties because she doesn't want to get excommunicated from them, and he always votes with them. And so it's still going to be a more closely even. People can say John Roberts is a Republican or, you know, a conservative, and I'll say look at his voting record in the Supreme Court. So it matters not to me at this point. But we do need to push back against them. But you know they're getting to a point where they're trying to force violence. See, the mask is slipped. They are fascist, and Trump hasn't fallen for it. And they're losing in that way. It's going to be. I think it's going to be a more interesting election than most people think because they cheated very heavily for Hillary. I mean, even in our state, there was a woman who voted for Hillary 12 times in Cincinnati, and she was put on charges for it. The Democrats don't joke around when they say vote early and vote often. That's what they want. And early voting and mail-in voting, that's rife for fraud. And they know it. And that's why a lot of places in the country have started, you know, putting the kibosh to that garbage. And there is a difference between mail-in voting and absentee voting. Absentee voting is what I do normally. And that's where you have to actually send a copy of your driver's license. Your signature has to match. And then they send you a ballot. Mail-in voting, we'd probably get ballots from the people who used to live here. You know, even though we've been here 25 years, you know, we own our house, that would probably be a reality. You know, the dead vote. I don't doubt that Ruth Bader Ginsburg's votes in all the states that she has homes will be counted. Because she's probably going to vote whether she did or not because she passed away. Your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, this is a great place, I think, here to give people some practical suggestions about voting. Okay, if you haven't voted absentee already, and a lot of people do vote absentee, and there is a difference between absentee voting, the normal form of absentee voting, and this jacked up mail-in voting thing that the left wants. Again, taking advantage of the Wuhan virus. Oh, we're all going to die, you know, so you can't go to the polls. Guys, I'm here to tell you that, yes, if you want to, on November the 3rd, you can go to the polls. And you're very likely not going to die. Okay? We know now, after half a year, and after some really great, diligent work in the background from some great researchers and people like Steve Dace and Ken McClinton and myself and some other people, we know the character of this virus. And it's not the Andromeda strain. It's not Captain Trips from the stand. Okay, it's not Ebola. It's a bad flu. It's a bad flu in about, when you boil the numbers down and get the real numbers, it's about as bad as the Hong Kong flu was in 1968. And I lived through that. Okay? And that means that, yes, you can go out to the polls on election day and you can vote. If you want to wear a mask, okay, if you think masks work, I don't think they do, but if you want to wear a mask to protect yourself, go ahead. In fact, there are probably a lot of voting stations that will require that you wear a mask. Personally, even though I don't think masks work, I've got one that I got back in March that, when if someone gripes at me to wear a mask and I think that it's actually worth it to go into a place, I'll just whip the thing out of my pocket and go, okay, fine, I'll wear this stupid thing. And I'll go in and do it, okay, and then I leave immediately and the mask comes off. Sure, guys, you can go to your regular polling stations and you can vote on November the 3rd if that's what you want to do. Now, if you don't, if you want to do it a different way, different states have different policies. Look for your elections commission for your state in particular, okay? There will be some places where you'll be able to get one of these mail-in ballots, and you can actually go and put it in a ballot box instead of throwing it in the mail. Now, some places it'll be the local city hall. In other places, your state election commission might have stations where you can do that. Okay, but guys, you do have alternatives for voting that don't include just trusting your ballot to the U.S. Postal Service. And I got to tell you, Kaiser, I've had to stop ordering from Amazon because my local letter carrier, this was even before they began tearing my apartment building down to rebuild it, my local letter carrier never could figure out where I lived. So as a result, nothing from Amazon hardly ever gets to me. Okay, and this is the same service that the left want us to trust all these ballots to. And let's remember also, people, that the union that the letter carriers belong to does support the left. They do support Democrats. Okay, so if you're in the middle, if you're a conservative, whatever, centrist, whatever you want to call yourself, and you're a little bit concerned about your ballot, let's just remember that is the case. You don't necessarily want your ballot to be handled by someone who is pretty sure to not be on your side.
I would say, yeah. I mean, that's the whole purpose of having the different judges and them being equally distributed at every polling place. Fortunately, I have Americans with Disabilities Act that I don't have to wear a mask, so I don't worry about it just because Gulf War, illness and whatnot. I got an inhaler at least. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not gonna ever wear a mask. They can't make me, and I won't do it. Because of the American with Disabilities Act. It's like I said, it's a bad flu. You've said the same thing. If it kills me, I'm a smoker. If it kills me, it kills me. Everybody's going to take the dirt nap someday, and I will too. And I'll just join my ancestors and be in, heaven, Valhalla, whatever you want to say. It boggles the mind that this is just a way for them, I believe, to test how much shit Americans will put up with. And I know that even rhino governors have pushed this. Unfortunately, in my state, a governor who I respected up until he did it, when all the left governors were, opening up their country, their places, ours panics and starts saying we've got to lock everything down again. And it's like, really? And then masks are mandatory. Really? And that showed me everything I needed to know about him. That means he's a rhino, a Republican in name only. And he's definitely not anybody that or anybody in my family will ever vote for again, sadly. And I have a Ohio flag that during the Gulf War, my first war, he sent me. He was a state representative at the time, just starting to get into politics, and it flew over the state house of Ohio, and he sent it to me, but he did it via taking it from the state house in the box, everything. I had a little letter for it, everything that it flew over the state house, and it travels with me everywhere I go now. But in he took it to my mother's trailer park and gave it to my mother to send to me. So, that he always got our family's vote because of just that. A highly paid politician would do that, to a woman who lived in a trailer park for her son. So, it's kind of sickening to see how people resort to their baser instincts. And I mean that in a very heartfelt way. Your thoughts?
Well, that's a great place to begin there. I mean, okay, what you're talking about, what DeWine did for you, for your family, was was retail politics, and that can really show very well, depending on who does it and depending on how it's done. Now, you see people like President Trump, who is out there. He's not necessarily pressing the flesh, but he's having these huge rallies and everything, and these went on going all the way into last summer, not the summer that we're just done with here, but the one before. And you'll also notice that in that same summer was when Joe Biden really began showing signs of his dementia, arguing with people, with his own supporters, calling his own supporters names, things of that nature. Jeff Mitchell and I covered this, I think, very well. Jeff did a great job on EDL Radio. Those incidents. Well, see, there was the one where this farmer who normally voted Democrat, was talking to him about issues, and Joe Biden almost said, "Look, fat ass," but it came out, "Look, fat." And then he, I don't know, he challenged him to arm wrestle or something. I'm not sure what the hell happened there. And then there was another event where this college kid, again, someone who very likely would have voted Democrat, had a question for him. I forget what the question was, but he comes up and calls her a lying dog-faced pony soldier. Now, he claims, and people have done some research, and they say that comes out of a movie, but, that devastated that kid. All right. And then, of course, the final one was when Biden was touring an auto plant. I think this was in Michigan. All right. And a guy asked him about the Second Amendment, and he started arguing hardcore with him. These are classic signs, by the way, of dementia. For everyone out there who's listening to this and who is saying, "God, why don't you guys get off this?" It's just a guy that's forgetting stuff once in a while, and we all do. I do as well. Okay, but a classic sign of dementia, and again, this is something that Jeff and I covered. Okay, a classic sign of dementia, especially from someone who is sharp in the first place. I mean, Biden might be evil, but he's not stupid. Okay, when a person of substantial mental qualities begins to feel those slipping from them, okay, and they're in a situation where they're pressured, like a campaign stop, all right, and they're challenged, they can lash out. In fact, they often do lash out. These are classic signs of dementia, guys, all right. We don't come up with this just because the Harris-Biden ticket, all right. There's plenty to oppose without that, but this is a man who, frankly, will not do very much at all in the presidency if his ticket wins, except just stand up there and be a figurehead for a while, and he will be puppeteered and controlled from behind by Harris and by a group of lefties that probably has already been chosen to do that job. Okay, that's one thing, guys, that you can depend on with the left is they plan everything. And sadly, we don't plan the way they do on the right, and we should. The leftists plan everything. If they win, if Joe Biden wins this election, they've got an exact plan of how they're going to handle things. They've got an exact plan of how they're going to handle Joe and his interaction with the public, which will decrease by about 90%. I can almost guarantee that. And they have an exact plan as to when they're going to have Kamala Harris take over. And they also have an exact plan as to who her vice presidential choice is going to be. Well, not hers, but the vice presidential choice is going to be. So, guys, you know, as Kaiser, as you said, all right, the left are going to cheat in this election. And I'll just say this. You can tell what the left is going to do because they telegraph heavily. And all they've been doing for, the past 4 or 5 months now is saying that Trump is going to cheat. Trump is going to cheat. He's going to, even if he loses, he's not going to want to leave the White House. He's going to cheat. It's going to be so much Republican cheating, you won't believe it. They're almost sounding like Trump doing that. But it's a rule that you can count on. And this is from a guy that has 52 years of observational experience looking at this. It's a rule that you can count on, that the more the left yell and holler and scream about what the right is going to do, the more they're doing it themselves.
That's the truth. That's been my experience in my, since I was 18, I've been able to vote. Shoot, I served in the Army a full year before I could vote. I just thought about that. It kind of struck me as funny. Every election cycle, it's been the same. The left accusing everybody of what they're doing. And luckily in our state, they usually get caught. So that's always been fun. I can tell you for a fact, on an off-year election, one year my mother and then her boyfriend, which I call my stepdad, even though, he wasn't a dad and he came late in life. The point is, they both passed away in an off-year election, but yet I get a call because they said, well, you voted twice. I said, no, I didn't. I voted in my town, London. And they go, well, you voted in where you used to live. I said, no, I didn't. I said, I didn't vote down there. Why? Well, we got to vote. And I said, okay, well, I'll come down. I said, because I know that signature isn't my signature. And they were doing it to investigate me, to think that I was voting twice. And I was like, no. And, of course, it wasn't mine. And when I was there, I was like, hey, just out of curiosity, did my mother and her boyfriend vote? And gave them the names. Oh, yeah, they voted. I said, they've been dead. Not quite a year. I said, something's going on here. And they said, can you get the death certificates? I said, yes. So that was free votes that were pulled. So I just find it funny. And by the way, since they were fraudulent votes, I asked the woman, I said, how'd I vote? Democrat. I said, never voted Democrat in my life. There was a Democrat I would have voted for in Ohio. If he was in my district, I would have voted for him. And that was James Trafficking.
Yeah.
And he was a stalwart. And he was a Kennedy-esque Democrat, if that makes sense.
Well, we've talked about James Trafficking before, and yeah, he was probably one of the last of the true Kennedy Democrats left in Congress until he was railroaded out of there, and then subsequently he met an accidental death. Yeah, he was someone, honestly, for a Democrat, I think that I admired the most of all Democrats, but that was only because. It was for two reasons. Because, for those who don't remember and haven't heard the previous shows, during I want to say this is called final orders or evening orders or whatever. It was these during a congressional day, at the end of the day, when the session was over and people could come in and into the chamber and make speeches and whatnot of various things. And Trafficking was a huge budget hawk. All right, he would put out these great speeches, pointing out these asinine things government was doing. with the taxpayers' money. And one of his favorite sayings got to be, beam me up, you know, and just great speeches. Might have been last orders, but at any rate, that's what he used to do. And of course, even though I do not speak for the National Federation of the Blind or represent them in any way on any of my programs. I always have to stress that. Okay. I was heavily involved with them years ago, and still believe in their precepts, by the way. But he used, when our representatives from Ohio used to come in during our Washington seminars, we would go in and lobby Congress. All right. When they used to come in, his response was always, "Hey, what do you got this year? I'll co-sponsor it." That was huge. That was something that we all really appreciated because, let's face it, blind folks are a minority, but we're not a big minority. We're not a minority that can stream into the streets in our thousands and try and intimidate people. We're just a minority, and we just want to be treated equally as our sighted brothers and sisters. And Trafficking understood that, and he was always with us. So yeah, Kaiser, I can well understand why you would vote for him. Hell, I probably would have if I'd lived in that district.
Yep. Well, folks, this is a taste of the show that me and Dave, and now you found out that he's not that unpleasant, the unpleasant blind guy, will continue on another stream, probably this Sunday, from 12 midnight to 1 o'clock on PSN Radio. And of course, if you can, please pitch everybody where they can find your show again, Dave, brother.
All right, yeah, and I'll even let everybody know where they can get hold of me. Yeah, I am host of the Unpleasant Blind Guy. That's a show that is on Spreaker.com. My show times are 1 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, and at midnight on Saturday. Okay, I'm also second banana to Jeff Mitchell, who hosts the English Fence League radio show. All right, that program is podcast live Thursdays and Sundays at 3:30 p.m. Eastern in the United States and at 8:30 p.m. in the UK. And I'm with Kenneth McClinton, who is the CEO of the Exceptional Conservative Network. We do a segment on Thursday nights. Just go to TECN TV. Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We do a very nice segment there. I'm also available for listen through SHR Media and Western Free Radio. If you want to get hold of me on social media, I'm Agador. That's Aggedor, the space monster, not the other character, or Dave Milner, and I can be found at MeWe, Minds, Mumblet, Parlor. Don't spend a lot of time there, but I can be found there. Spreely, all right, USA Life, and I'm always Agador on Gab. That's my favorite social media place since I've been banned from Facebook. All right, and guys, I just want to say that, I just want to say be prosperous, be vigilant, and be blessed. And I want to thank you, Kaiser, for allowing me to be on your great program today.
Thank you, Dave. And folks, I can't wait to see you on Sunday, 12 midnight to 1 o'clock. Me and Dave will carry this conversation on, so put a bookmark in it where we're at right now, and we'll continue this conversation Sunday. This is just a taste for you guys to enjoy. Thank you for sitting on my big orange couch, drinking your coffee, tea, soda, and adult libation. And as you leave, I'll slowly raise the drawbridge. Thanks for stopping by Kaiser's Castle. With that being said, shove out.